A little bit earlier on today's show, we talked about insects and insect scouting. Well, now we want to focus on late season in soybeans. What can you do to increase yield? Obviously, we got the insect thing. We'll talk about that just a little bit more. But in addition to that, we wanted to discuss diseases, late season weed control, and even fertility in soybeans.
I'll just start with the fertility piece, Brian. When you think about soybeans, once they hit that reproductive stage, they have a high demand for nutrients. They need available nutrients to get into that plant quickly. This is why so often we hear farmers say, well, August rains make soybeans in the upper Midwest. They do. Why? Because you're flushing a whole bunch of nutrients into that crop. So the key thing that you can control, whether you're a dryland farmer or an irrigated farmer, is to have nutrients there so that when we do get moisture, they can get into the plant. On our farm last year, it was really interesting at our field day site in our first step trials where we're taking our first steps to higher yields. We ran out of gas with potassium. We got some 90 bushel soybeans, but we still ran out of gas on potassium. There's going to be something, there's going to be a nutrient that ends up being a yield limiting factor for you on your farm. Now, hopefully it's not N, P, or K, 'cause if it's not, well, that means you're doing a great job on the big things. But to find out exactly what that nutrient is, you've got to do some plant tissue analysis through the season. This is a great time to be doing plant tissue tests in your soybean fields and tracking those nutrient levels as the season progresses, and then correlate that back to your soil test data to try and get a full picture of what's happening in the field.
All right, but here's the big thing. A lot of people say, well, I just need nitrogen late in the season for soybeans. In a lot of cases in heavy soil, you don't. Here's what I'm getting at. Organic matter in the soil is going to break down and release free nitrogen for your soybean plant. Yes, it's possible if we're talking 80, 90, 100, 120 bushel beans, you need more N. But if you're only talking 50 or 60 bushel beans in soils where you have 3, 4, 5% organic matter, there's probably going to be enough nitrogen coming available out of that organic matter. I doubt that nitrogen is your problem. It could be, but I doubt it. More likely, it's potassium or a micronutrient. Now, when it comes to potassium, that can move through the soil to some degree in really sandy soil. But the problem is if you've got heavier soil, let's say your cation exchange capacity is 15, 20, 25, 30, something like that, well, you can throw potassium on the soil. It's not going anywhere. So you say, well, how do I get potassium into the plant? You can do a little foliar feeding, but more than anything, you got to build up your soil for the long term. So like Darren said, that nutrient is available and sitting there ready to go when your plant actually needs it in that heavy ground.
The other thing you need to be able to utilize all those nutrients is you have to have a healthy plant that has lots of good green plant tissue that's catching sunlight and producing energy for the plant. Now, when we think about leaf diseases in soybeans, it's a little different than thinking about them in corn, but we do have diseases that pop up in soybeans depending on where you're at in the country, whether it's frog eye leaf spot in the south or aerial blight, or you have white mold or sudden death syndrome or different things that show up in the north. When you've got something like white mold, I know many farmers this year were worried about white mold due to the weather that we were having and these kinds of things, so they sprayed at R1. Well, you have to spray again a couple weeks later, and then again a couple weeks later if those weather conditions persist, and white mold could be a factor throughout the rest of the season. The other thing we hear a lot about is plant health benefits, and keeping that leaf tissue green and growing is excellent. It's a good way to keep your plant healthy, and yes, you may be putting those plant health applications of fungicides on right about now when we're in that R2, R3, and beyond stage.
Well, the big thing with fungicides is just to understand the prices have come way down in the last few years. So we're going out with a half rate at that R1, R2, maybe R3 stage for $3 an acre. It's $3. If you're already out there spraying something else, at least try some fungicide. And when you're doing yield checks, all you need is a 1 bushel gain and you doubled or tripled your money. So I'm just trying to say it can be very small incremental gains, yet you still got a good return. And I know you're probably thinking, hey, I need to cut costs, got to cut costs. Well, just don't cut stuff that's making you money. On our farm, spraying a fungicide's been making us money. We're gaining anywhere from 1 to 5 bushels by spraying a fungicide for $3. Okay, that sounds like a pretty good ROI to me.
Right, the other thing when you're out spraying anything in the field, you may consider using some plant growth regulators or some biological type products. There are certainly many different products out there on the market today that could help improve growth, speed up growth, improve plant health even. So do consider some of those things. If you've been using some of those products, this may be the time that you're applying them. If you haven't tried any of those things and you think, wow, I've got all my fertility things and my weeds, insects, and disease under control. All that stuff's good. Now I could start using some of those extra pieces and maybe they'll add a little yield for you as well.
Last thing I'll say in terms of weed control, you got to make sure you check the label on the product. Ingenia and XtendiMax, you're done at R1. Roundup, you're done at R2. Yes, some of the other products, maybe the grass killers, you can spray a little bit later, but there are a lot of herbicides that technically you're going to be off label by the time you get to R3, R4. So again, just make sure you're checking the label. We want you to do everything you can in terms of getting great weed control, but you can see how important those residual herbicides are, because once you start getting late in the season, you run out of options pretty quick.
So the key message today, don't give up on your soybeans. There's still plenty of time in most of the country to influence soybean yields and help your profits as well.
Well, we talked a little about weed control in soybeans, and one of those weeds that may show up is our Weed of the Week. We'll tell you how to stop it coming up next.